Hey guys, today we're going to be celebrating Valentine's Day by talking about love in the many forms it may appear. Specifically, the couples I have in my various OC universes. Let's jump right into our first couple. They come from a universe that you already know. I'm not sure if I've shared the name formally with you, but it's called Numa, which is the name of like the magic energy. At least that's what the title would be if it were a comic or a show. It's the same universe that Reeve, Celeste, and Wynn are from. Speaking of Celeste, this first couple we're drawing is her parents. Why specifically them out of the three sets of parents that Celeste, Wynn, and Reeve have? Well, because I wanted to, of course. Also, I've always had a very specific image of Celeste's parents in my head. Their names are Estrella Pleiades and Arbor New Valley, but out of the two, mostly her mother, the Queen. In any case, the beginning of her parents' love story before the drama of Celeste not living up to elven royal expectations and being high-key discriminated against for not being a full elf, and her eventually running away to her dad to live a more common, less aristocratic life, was actually very romantic. A carpenter, her dad, carving ornate wooden furnishings for the royal court, catching the eye of the Queen, at the time princess, and Celeste's mother, secretly falling in love and meeting each other under the cover of night. I'm absolutely sure there are at least 237 manga on Webtoon or wherever else with a similar plot, but are the characters quite as seasoned? Let's ask the audience. Anyways, I'm not usually that into love stories, but my friend who is obsessed with romance says this is some of my best work, and frankly, I agree. I'm a visionary. Arbor, who is again Celeste's dad, a carpenter having moved from far away at only about 25 years old, which is around the same age as Estrella at the time, though I'm not sure if she would have been a bit older because I have not decided if the elves in this universe like have extremely long lifespans. It'll either be up to 100 years longer or 50 years longer, I don't know, but the whole living thousands of years thing, I don't think I want to do that. Regardless, he moved to this big city pursuing his business as a crafter. He is a strong, literally and figuratively, reliable and warm man. He takes pride in his abilities and is very hardworking and dedicated, but still charismatic. Estrella was and still is a stone-cold, stoic, and poised woman, as is customary and expected of all nobles, as well as a magician working with celestial beings and using their magic, as is the specialty of her family. She was so used to playing a role instead of being her own person that meeting a man such as Arbor, who did what he wanted, when he wanted, made his own living, and was bright and genuine and free, certainly made her feel a spark, which was more magical than even literal magic. The first day he sparked up conversation with her while taking a break from his carving work, the connection was instant. His presence bringing some much needed energy to the courtyard, and more importantly, Estrella's daily life. But eventually, maybe after a couple weeks, he was done with his work, and knowing they wanted to continue seeing each other, they promised to continue meeting in secret, as it would of course be looked down upon, if not completely forbidden, for Estrella to have a relationship with a commoner. And that moment is when they'd have their first kiss. It's also the scene that I've drawn today for us. And Celeste was a product of later rendezvous. The stars had seemed to align for them until, unfortunately, their romance was cut short as Estrella's pregnancy revealed her and Arbor's relationship. Under immense pressure, Estrella chose her role as the next queen over her boyfriend and cut things off with him to stay in her family's good graces. Celeste was raised in the castle with her mother, her father only visiting every once in a while and sending letters back and forth with her. At present day in the story, Estrella has a tenuous connection with her daughter and her former boyfriend, and Celeste sees her as an overbearing, controlling, and rigid figure in her life. There's definitely some content between the two of them, mostly on Celeste's part. I think she just wouldn't understand how her mother could let herself be controlled so easily, because that's something that she would never allow for herself. Anyways, I mentioned earlier that I always had a very clear image of Estrella in my mind. The version that I've drawn today, this is when she was still young and tender and enjoying her life, but before so many responsibilities got in the way. And drawing her like this, weirdly, made me have a lot more empathy for my own character. Of course, I created her, so I know her motivations, I know her vibe, but weirdly, I've always sort of thought of her as like a pseudo-antagonist. But in reality, she's just a victim of circumstances. She never really did anything particularly wrong, but I do think she ended up making the wrong choice in the end when presented with two options. She definitely holds that against herself, and it doesn't help that Celeste also holds that against her. But if it's any consolation, Arbor absolutely understood. He was very amicable in the whole situation. He always knew it was probably risky trying to get with a noble anyway. Here's the final product. This is definitely the most elaborate of all the pieces today. This took me a good 20 hours. Also, drawing kissing is a lot harder than you'd think. Moving on to couple 2 of 3, Malachi and Isaac. Also, I know you just saw me trace over a drawing in the background. I promise I drew that. It's just really old art that I made of them a long time ago. They've changed a lot, so I don't know. I was just repurposing an old sketch. So I will post proof, don't worry. These 2 are from a story of mine that I have yet to introduce you to, and they are actually 2 of the main 5 protagonists of the story, which is called Powerbound. It involves superpowers and teenagers and evil corporations. We'll get into that later. This story is one that I've been working on for a long time, and compared to Numa or any of my other stories, it's the one that's closest to being a webcomic or whatever else I would end up making it into. Not that I have the time for anything of the sort right now. These 2 were my first real couple, in the sense that they were more than just 2 random characters that I drew and declared in love. They're 2 real characters with real personality and 2 teenagers of Gen Z, just like me and presumably you. Malachi, the one on the right in the red, is slightly angsty, creatively inclined, super into music and art, drawing designs on his clothes, and wanting to be an independent artist, music artist of his own one day. Very independent, opinionated, and stubborn, just like his sister Maylene. They get it from their mother. And he may seem unapproachable or kind of like a dick sometimes. He's still one of the most loyal people you could imagine and protective of his friends and family, and of course, Isaac. Isaac is a bit more quirky, maybe a little cringe by our standards in the world today, but extremely genuine and earnest. Maybe to a fault sometimes because he fails to perceive certain social cues. Not from a lack of attentiveness, he has plenty of that. He can just be oblivious at times. He likes what he likes. He's a nerd and a geek. His dad is an engineer at a big corporation. Maybe that same big corporation that I mentioned was evil, but who knows? And I guess that intellectual touch may have rubbed off on him when it comes to his intelligence. But being the smart one doesn't stop him from spending all his free time and money on comics, video games, and merch of his many random niche interests. He's a big, tall, geeky dude, and he was too busy wondering who would win between one superhero and another to realize he was gay. But lucky for him, Malachi pretty much always knew he played both sides and was the one to eventually confess feelings, even though the 2 of them had felt that romantic tension for an extremely long time. And it was very plainly obvious to their friends, Jackie, Ivy, and Maylene, who already knew. And they were just relieved that the will they, won't they was over when Malachi and Isaac announced their couple status. Also, I didn't get around to mentioning it, but these 2 do have powers. Malachi has seismokinesis, which is the ability to control vibrations. Basically, he can like make earthquakes. There's a few other things, but that's the main one. And Isaac can make force fields. Also, this is definitely my favorite Also, this is definitely my favorite piece of the bunch. I think it's so cute and Valentines-y. And I don't know, I just like it. I hope you guys like it too. Lastly, couple 3 of 3, Vanessa and Basil. They're not necessarily a romantic couple, more of a platonic soulmates type of thing. But Valentine's Day is about love, and love is more than just romance, if you ask me. Basil and Vanessa are also from the Powerbound universe, which, as I said, involves superpowers, teenagers, and evil mega corporations. So they both have powers. Vanessa has telekinesis, and Basil has indestructibility. And they were given their powers by a company called Tempest Technologies. Also, they're technically the villains, well, only 2 of many, because they do work for Tempest, and Tempest is the evil mega corporation, but they're not like evil or anything, so don't worry about it. Tempest is sort of the Powerbound universe's equivalent to Apple or Google, till they make phones, streaming services, dishwashers, and apparently mutant child soldiers. 2 of which, there are several, are of course Vanessa and Basil. Tempest is also kind of similar to Vought from The Boys, if you've seen that, in the sense that they want to make super soldiers for monetary gain, and that they use a mysterious serum specifically to mutate humans into having powers. But for all those similarities, the story itself is very different. Also, I swear, I wrote this before I saw The Boys. The way Tempest goes about procuring subjects is by finding people who are 1, under 18, being fully developed causes the serum to have unsavory effects, 2, genetically compatible, even if the person is under 18, Not everyone can be exposed to the serum and get superpowers. Some might just get sick and die, or turn into monsters. And 3, they want people with little to no family connection, so no one comes looking for them after Tempest makes them into a test subject and keeps them at their facility. Anyways, to really get into who they are as characters, I've got to get into their backstories more. Basil and Vanessa are both orphans, either by choice in Vanessa's case, she left her family due to them being abusive towards her for being trans, or by chance in Basil's, having lost his family in a car crash, which is where he got all his cool scars and also a traumatic brain injury, leaving him with amnesia for most of his life before being taken in by Tempest as a test subject. They saved Basil from what would have certainly been his death by using the serum to kickstart his body. It was a crazy risk and definitely came at a cost of some of his mental stability, but he was alive, and his new power, indestructibility, makes it so at least he'll never be physically damaged in such a way again. His personality and life pre-Tempest is something I want to keep on the low because it might be an emotional reveal whenever I get around to making this comic, but it's safe to say he changed completely. The mutations from the serum fortified his body and increased his muscle mass by a lot. He's also now incredibly reckless and impulsive because he knows he can't be hurt anyway. He's kind of like a Deadpool without the blood and guts. Even though he has a few screws loose, he's still a person under there. He still likes movies and foods from his culture, he's Egyptian, because they have an eerie nostalgia to him as if they are things he's loved before. The old Basil isn't completely gone, he just needs some help to find himself again. Vanessa was also a much different person before Tempest, though the trauma wasn't all the corporation's fault. Growing up in an area where being certain things just wasn't allowed, namely being transgender, was obviously not the best environment for a young child. In terms of the kind of treatment she faced, I think we all know what that kind of discrimination looks like. I don't want to focus too much on the bad, when Vanessa herself is such an interesting character. She's an avid reader, devouring books and getting immersed in those worlds. She's a huge fan of Stephen King novels, she also loves poetry, sometimes even writing her own, but she keeps that a secret and would probably kill anyone who saw it. Her outward persona is hard and mean, but that's just a defense mechanism from years of having to protect herself. She really just wants to live a normal life and be a normal girl, because for far too long, she has felt as if she was out of place. She took it upon herself to run away from home so she could freely be whoever she was and lived on the streets for a while. Eventually, she saw an ad in a really bad part of town for a program where you could get housing for being a guinea pig in some scientific trials. She figured, fuck it, I don't have anything to lose anyway, and signed herself up. She walked into the abandoned looking lab without an ounce of fear. And now she has even less to fear because she can pick up a car with her mind. The way that Basil and Vanessa, who were the first 2 subjects of their particular group, have gone from Vanessa barely tolerating Basil to begrudging friends to real friends and eventually besties for life over the course of the story is definitely one of my favorite parts of Powerbound. Basil is a loose cannon and operates off impulse, but he's also extremely emotionally available because he has no real sense of shame or fear or vulnerability, while Vanessa is extremely closed off, and for good reason considering her history, only acting out of survival for the longest time. Maybe Basil is a bit unhinged, but he for sure brings some needed energy to the cold and sterile lab. The Tempest lab is kind of like a really fucked up X-Men. It's a long story, there's a lot to be said. I can make a video about Powerbound if you guys want. I didn't do a great job of explaining exactly what the motivations of Tempest are and how wide-reaching their range is, so definitely drop a comment if you would like to hear more about that. Here's the finished piece of Vanessa and Basil. This is the first drawing of these 3 that I made. It actually went backwards in chronological order. This was the first one, Malachi and Isaac was second, and then Celeste's parents were third, which also kind of means that this one is sort of the worst one. It's not bad, I do like it, but it's probably the least polished of all of them. I wasn't planning to make a video when I first made it, but regardless, I hope you guys still enjoy the art. Also, here's some runner-ups for couples that I would have been drawing in this video. I knew I only wanted to do 3 couples so that the video wouldn't be too long and I could get it out on time. So there's a couple couples that got left out. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Also, if you have any questions about the characters or how I do art, feel free to ask those in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them for you. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.